We come to item number 9 on the agenda, which is the Ports of Auckland Limited progress with implementation of the Independent Health and Safety Review recommendations. So if I can, I've got Sarah Johnson-Smith here, and should we, do you want to talk first, Sarah, and then we'll, so I will get the resolution on the books. I'll move that we receive the report. Can I have a seconder, Councillor Simpson, and invite Sarah Johnson-Smith to talk to the report, please.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, councillors. I'll just do a short introduction and then hand over to our ports representatives, which I can introduce now. We've got Wayne Thompson, the interim CEO, and Vanessa Matakatea, who is the Senior Health and Safety and Wellbeing Senior Manager at the Ports of Auckland. So they'll run you through a short presentation. But in terms of the report, you'll recall back in April, Council received the final report of the Independent Health and Safety Review that was conducted by Chesons. That review made 45 recommendations, and the Port has committed to implementing all of these. So at that April meeting, Council made a series of resolutions, which included Resolution C, which asked the Port to present to the governing body meetings in July and in October on progress with implementation of the review's recommendations. So the memo and the report in attachment A responds to this resolution. Ports of Auckland will provide a more detailed report to the governing body in October, and that will include the independent advice from Chesons, who will be giving their assessment of the Port's progress with implementation of the recommendations. And that independent advice was requested also by the governing body through Resolution F. So that gives you the context for the report. And unless you have any questions for me, I'd welcome the Port representatives up to come and give their presentations.
So if there's no questions of Sarah, if I can invite Wayne, Vanessa and Matt to the table. While they're coming up, can I also acknowledge Russell and Simon from the Maritime Union at the back of the room, and just draw your attention to our unanimous decision, resolution number G, which said expect the board and management of Ports of Auckland will engage closely with the workforce and their union representatives to fully implement the health and safety recommendations of the independent review. I'm just going to, you know, we sometimes throw brickbats. This time it's a bouquet to Ports and to MUNS that are working closely together on this. And Russell said he didn't mind me saying that he thought that the relationship between the union and the Ports at the current time was the best that it's ever been, and how pleased they are, Vanessa, with the job that you're doing in your responsibility for health and safety. So starting on a very, very positive note, I'll invite you, Wayne. I think you're leading off, are you? And then I'll leave it in your hands. Thank you.
Look, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to provide an update to the governing body and council. I might just start, given Vanessa is reasonably new to the Port and new to some of the people around the table, just ask her to do a brief introduction.
Thank you, Wayne. Kia ora koutou. Vanessa Matakatea toku ingoa. Just to give a little bit of background on how I've got into the role at the Ports of Auckland. Spent 10 years previously in the telecommunications industry as a service provider to Chorus. Halfway through that time, the ultra-fast broadband network is what got me into safety specifically, with significant risks involved in that space of installing ultra-fast broadband throughout New Zealand. Became the national manager for safety and wellbeing for Vision Stream, being the service provider for that network. From there, I went into Fletcher Construction on the New Zealand International Convention Centre. Unfortunately, shortly after starting, approximately a month, the fire occurred on that site, and spent the next 15 months recovering from that. That was an experience for me towards safety and wellbeing as well, from all aspects, and leading from that into the Ports of Auckland. Saw the opportunity, actually saw it about a year earlier, jumped at the opportunity for the Ports of Auckland. My background is I am an Auckland girl at heart, always have been, and very proud of that. And being involved in the Ports of Auckland was a huge part of what that represents. So once I sort of got in there, met a lot of the people that are in there, feel very at home, feel very, it's where I'm meant to be. So happy to be contributing and thankfully in a good way, but certainly recognise the opportunity of the report coming in shortly after me starting, having put that in front of me as a great opportunity to pick that up and run with it. So, thank you for that, Wayne.
Thank you, and a big welcome from all of us. Kia ora.
Yeah, thanks, Vanessa. Yeah, I just want to start with an opening statement that as a interim CEO and new management team, we can't go back and fix the past. But what we can do is sort of work on and deal with the future. And that's what we're committed to do as a team. Sort of the key messages we want to leave you with today, and you would see we have a detailed plan in place following the review. And we put a lot of time and effort into developing that very detailed plan. We've also put a high degree of monitoring around that plan to make sure we're keeping to that plan and we are successful against the outcomes that are required. We're making good progress against that plan. We have completed 7 of the points in the plan, and we've got another 29 in progress. There is a lot of work to do in this space. We have resourced it. We've resourced your team. And there's a commitment right across the business in delivering against this plan. We have re-engaged Chasms to come in and review what we're doing. It's important that that third party keeps an eye on our progress and holds us to account and runs a ruler over us ticking these off as we achieve them, and we'll keep that going. Part of the core of this plan was working on staff engagement. And we believe that is improving, and it is a core focus that we are, it's a core thing we are focusing on. We can get some wins in that space. It comes in and underpins what we're trying to do with these health and safety objectives. So there is a lot of effort going into that. Having said that, I'll hand over to Vanessa, who will sort of run you through in more detail where we're at and what we're working on.
All right, so essentially we've got a few slides to take you through, but by all means open to the floor if you want to ask questions as we go through that. I understand we'll do questions at the end as well. The first slide is really talking to the report itself. So as you're aware, 45 recommendations were made out of that report. What we've done is we've picked up those 45 recommendations, committed to every single one of them. And through that created a forecast of completion timeline and what it would take to achieve those. The report that we've provided you and will provide you on a monthly basis gives you the high-level summary of the CHAS-NZ report. And essentially that's all it is. It provides you the summary, it gives you the tracking status of each recommendation, the forecast of when we expect to have it completed by, and what the priority is on each of those recommendations, with some being higher than others. You'll see just in that quick snapshot on the screen that the 45 recommendations are spread out and will be complete by June next year. It's a good goal, it's achievable. I wouldn't have put any of those dates on there if we didn't think it was achievable, but certainly there's a detailed action behind each of those recommendations to achieve that. What I'm demonstrating in this particular slide is to achieve the 45 recommendations, and if you've read the descriptions of those recommendations, some of those are not necessarily a specific action on what needs to be done. There can be statements made that you need to improve this, but not necessarily how. So to achieve that, we had to build a safety and wellbeing strategic plan for the Ports of Auckland, which I would have done coming into any new role anyway. So we built the strategic plan, and I had actually started working on that before the CHAS-NZ report had been released. We've pleasantly, not surprised, but happy to see that when the recommendations came through 3 months after me starting, it was very much aligned with my own interpretations of when I went into the role. So the detailed strategic plan is the how-to. So we will provide you the CHAS-NZ monthly report, but our strategic plan is the detail of how we're going to achieve each of those recommendations. In some cases, it may take 2 or 3 actions to achieve one of the recommendations. As a result, our strategic plan has 80 actions that we'll need to complete in that same time frame. So what this is demonstrating you are the 7 recommendations we have completed on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side are the specific actions we've done to achieve that. So if I use the very first one, which the recommendation is to continue our support with the port industry, essentially the action we've taken from that is that I've joined the PIA Industry Forum, and I'm actively involved in those forums on a quarterly basis, but also on a regular basis, checking in with other ports. Having visited 2 ports already in the time that I've been here, good to get some of those relationships building. So I see that as a necessity to building those relationships for that one recommendation. So again, just, I won't go through all 7, but just giving you that example of the action behind the recommendation is a little more detail. Moving on to the strategic plan, this is, sorry, to the CHAS-NZ report. This is highlighting to you the 29 recommendations. So yes, we've completed 7. Essentially, we started 45 at the start of the time the report was released. We had already started most of it. So the 29 recommendations are in progress, are most certainly in progress. Some of those nearing completion, some again just need 1 or 2 more things, and they'll tick off the box as well. What we did with the strategic plan, linking it to the CHAS-NZ report, is we assigned an executive sponsor from the executive team of the Ports of Auckland on every one of the key objectives. So there is a member of the executive team supporting each one of the objectives and helping to drive that. My request of them is that they be the face and the front and the lead and the sponsor of those key objectives, so that it's not perceived that it's all happening by the safety team as such. So certainly needs to be a Ports of Auckland strategic plan led by the executive team. And then through that, we've also, as Wayne mentioned, engaged CHAS-NZ to review the recommendations, review our strategic plan, review the completed recommendations already. That took place last week for the first time. So they've come through and we'll likely get a more formal report. But I'm happy to say they were very pleased with the shift in culture and shift in the feeling of the Ports of Auckland since they were last there. This is the strategic plan. So the 80 actions, as you can see, exact same format of the report, provides me a summary, provides a forecast of completion, the tracking status of each one, and the priority status again. So really just showing you the action plan behind the recommendations. We pulled out a couple of key areas to discuss today, given the concern. Automation safety case was one of those. So I wanted to share with you that the Ports of Auckland has engaged an automated straddle systems expert to develop an automation safety system plan. The approach to that essentially has been sort of taking it back to scratch and looking at what that safety plan needs to look like. A key aspect that's come into that safety plan is the ASNZ 4024, which is essentially the safe use of machinery. And this was likely a bit of a gap to what was there previously. So certainly had safe systems in place and safe practices around the automation system. The gap was how it integrated with the rest of the Ports of Auckland. So safe use of machinery starts to apply that extraordinary safety requirements around that. The control measures that have come out of that will be specifically linked to a control system. So again, linking it back to the importance of that. But more importantly, the verification and validation of any safety requirements will continue ongoing as well, whether it be internally or with our vendors. Worker engagement. This is my passion. This is the reason I'm at the Ports of Auckland. The strategic plan was established with and for our Ports of Auckland employees, contractors and key stakeholders. I'll come back again and say this is, without being too overconfident, this is what I'm good at. So talking to people, listening to them, hearing their voice, giving them a voice, making sure that they are contributing to our strategic plan has been the #1 priority for me. Through that, we've established we've reinstated 8 safety and wellbeing committees who essentially were all there and had a voice but wasn't coming out strong enough. So we've given them some very good structure to allow that voice to be heard. There's approximately 80 representatives in those groups right across the business. Union officials participate in our container terminal committee, so we've actually invited the union to our health and safety committees also, and actively have conversations with them around health and safety outside those committee meetings also. The Safety and Wellbeing Engagement Forum really has strong representation, so fair to say I think some of the business units have sort of been left to figure out health and safety on their own. We ensure that there is a health and safety rep at every one of those safety meetings now to support and govern their needs. And visible safety leadership is really, really important for me. So we are and will be spending quite a lot of time growing the levels within the business of what that means to us at the Ports of Auckland. Any questions?
Sorry, look, I hope that was useful and gives you sort of a good update as where we're at. You know, the approach we're taking here, health and safety is continuous improvement, and we're on that journey, and we will continue on that journey, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Wayne and Vanessa, for that. That was a really good account, and you know, just to be able to get that feedback from the Chasms group that did the review, that the culture is being changed at the ports, I think is really, really positive, and we welcome that. But I'll just open it up now to see if we have questions. I have the first question from Councillor Wayne Walker.
Couple of questions. First question just goes to health and safety around automation and the like. Assuming that process requires more dependence on computers and that interface, is part of the health and safety looking at security against hacking by having some form of internal separation from other systems? So that's one question.
Definitely. So going into automation, as you know, that was a number of years ago, very aware of cyber issues. So it's fair to say, as a port, we have gone quite cyber heavy. We employed one executive. We were lucky to have him in the port with a lot of experience, and we've built a cyber team. We're one of the few businesses in New Zealand too that have what we call a CSOC, so we have a group of people monitoring what's happening on that network 24/7. We've also got that outsourced to a supplier as well. A lot of not all, but most of the automation equipment is in a separated network. We call it our OT network that keeps it away from the everyday corporate network where there's a whole lot more risk.
Okay, so that's a really good answer. The other question I've got just goes to the overall health and safety strategy that you're putting in place, and it follows on from your comment about visiting other ports. I'd assume, but correct me if I'm wrong, that what we're doing in Ports of Auckland around health and safety could be New Zealand leading. I don't know whether other ports are at, but I'd be interested to hear what you've got to say on that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. So as Vanessa said, she's acted with other ports. We can pass on and we can learn from them as well. What I will say, I think it's a little bit premature, but I would love to see Ports of Auckland taking a leading position across the industry. I think it's a little bit soon until we've worked through a number of these initiatives and got our own house in better order. But I think there's a lot that we have learned that we can share, not just with ports, but with other industries and other people and other parties as well. So ultimately would like to take a leadership position.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pipacoon.
O tēnā koe, Your Worship, ngā mihi nui ki a koutou, tēnā koe Vanessa, great to see you in this role and the opportunity to present today. Good to hear how things are progressing. I have two questions. The first one, I just wondered if you have had the opportunity to work across sectors, and I'm particularly thinking about the City Rail Link. I met the head of safety there, I think his name's Rob Mayer, when we had the tunnel opening the tunnel boring machine ceremony, and his approach and implementation to safety just seemed to be day and night compared to what our experience had been with the port and the best practice that he had brought from the UK, particularly around the engagement of workers and the approach so that safety is absolutely top of mind, and they're determined to get through that major infrastructure project with not one single fatality, and obviously aiming for zero serious injuries as well. So are you in the position, I mean, I know you're quite new to the role, but is that the learning opportunity that we have across sectors within Auckland?
Short answer is absolutely. So having come from other sectors, telecommunications, construction, and then sort of coming into the port, it's certainly been an eye-opener for me to look at the port and compare to those sectors. So I have, even since I've been at the port, met with the head of health and safety for Kiwi Rail, other sectors, the Sky City still connected with some of those representatives as well. I think going back to the earlier question in relation to the industry, there is certainly a state that we need to improve. There's certainly some learning that we can get from other sectors. Health and safety is generally health and safety much the same across most sectors. How it's applied in the engagement space comes down to the individuals that are working in the executive team. Like any health and safety, it's led from the top. So the sectors will offer different risk, and in the port, there's certainly critical risk involved in that space. So the risk may change, but the approach to health and safety should be 90% transparent. That answers the
And
question.
could you just confirm where your role sits within the organisation and what team you have supporting you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I currently report through to Wayne as the interim CEO. And when I arrived at the Ports of Auckland, I was one of 5. I now, as at next week, will have a team of 15 in that role. So I have certainly recruited a number of people. I can openly say that 50% of those recruits have strong health and safety qualifications, but the other 50% are people-based engagement specialists to help with that culture shift.
Ngā mihi. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, and it was good. One of the recommendations, I think, was that the senior manager of safety and wellbeing report directly to the chief executive. So that's something that has now been put in place, and I think that brings health and safety right into the forefront and the centre of what the port's doing. So welcome that as well. Councillor John Watson.
Thank you. And just in terms of that changing culture, could you just please clarify for me again the role of the union in the various committees? So I see a number of safety committees put up, and I think I heard where they were invited along. Certainly one of my concerns, prior to this has been the apparent sort of absence of the union in an official capacity in terms of health and safety. So could you just please spell out in a little more detail exactly what the position of the union is in terms of, I guess, membership of a committee or a group in terms of, authorised input, if I can put it that way, or official input?
I'll answer that at a higher level, then I'll get Vanessa to add to it. But I think there's 2 ways of looking at it. Our own staff are on those committees, and as Vanessa said, there's up to 80 people across the port, and a lot of those are union members and union voted the members onto those committees. The major change is that we have representatives from 2 of the unions, the major unions and the container terminal, officials now on those committees, and they are fully active members with full input to those committees. Then outside that as well, as Vanessa said, there's a lot of more day-to-day contact with union delegates and with union officials that we're working on putting structure around that contact as well.
Great.
Probably the only thing I'd
Sorry,
like to
Vanessa.
add. Yes, sorry. Probably the only thing I'd like to add to that is my approach. I have not in the past had a lot of experience dealing with unions. But my approach to it is generally the unions are out for what's best for the people. Health and safety is always what's best for the people. So 90% of what we're talking about should be very closely aligned. So that has been the approach to the conversation. I'm again open, giving them a voice. They are there on behalf of their people. If their people are not comfortable to talk to us and they want to do it through the union, then the message should still be the same. So that has been how we've received it and certainly requested it.
Well, I think that's an encouraging starting point, Vanessa. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Bill Cashmore online.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Wayne, Vanessa, and Matt. It's lovely to hear from you, and thank you for the report. I've got two quick questions. The first one's to you, Wayne. How are you relating what's happening in the health and safety space on the ground at the port back to the board, and are they having direct experiences of that?
The answer is yes, definitely. So one vehicle for that is quite important. The board set up a health and safety committee that meets monthly, which management report to. Vanessa has full access to that committee and all the committee members, as she does to the full board. So very good engagement at the appropriate level of detail between the board, more detail engagement between management and the committee. So that's working very well from our point of view.
Thank you, that's good to hear. The second question is to you, Vanessa. When you work through often these implementation, these things like the health and safety, the CHASMS report, you identify other things that have not have been missed but have not have been prioritised, or that there are shortfalls. Have you identified anything that is over and beyond the CHASMS that you wish to see implemented?
Yes, I don't know if I would call them over and above the CHASNZ. They could be implied as addressed through those recommendations either way, but the one key area I've probably pulled out is injury prevention. So I essentially the review is very much focused on systems and culture. The piece around injury prevention activities and reducing injuries more specifically through injury prevention methods. Again, another passion of mine is the well-being of our people, and I'm confident that if we address the well-being through whether it be physical or psychological risk, so again, quite passionate about the psychological risk that we achieve through the well-being of our people, we will absolutely prevent injuries through that space. So I have certainly added more in our strategy around that piece of work.
It's great to hear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Christabi.
Thank you, Mayor, and kia ora koutou, and welcome Wayne and Vanessa. Good to see you, and Matt. Vanessa, you just mentioned earlier on that you had engaged, I think it was a specialist straddle safety person. What was the correct title of that person?
The safety systems expert.
Safety systems expert.
Automation.
Is that a vendor's representative, and is that person on the ground, or are they advising remotely?
No, they're not from the vendor. It's from a company that specialises in automation around the world. The particular individual is based in Australia. He has spent significant time on the ground. At the moment, with the travel bubble, he can't, so he's working remotely from Australia. But we've basically engaged him for a number of hours per week in the safety space, but in the overall sort of contribution to the overall automation project as well. So he's bringing a wealth of knowledge, largely from the implementation within the Australian environment.
Okay, so he's been on the ground, he's familiar. It's not like we're facing another, a remote person.
No. He's been here and he will be back when we can get him back in from Australia.
Okay. Look, while today's not about interrogating the automation program, but there's a crossover between the safety component of the automation to ensure that it can be progressed to the next stage. What sort of, roughly in percentage terms, how much do the safety concerns around automation, how do they add up to the overall program of reaching go live automation?
sort of repeat what Vanessa said before. So, there's a lot of safety things in place around automation. It's not as though we were sitting there worried overall about the safety and where it was at. I think the hole that Chasm pointed out is it needed more structure. So it needed to be in a systematic approach, and we've chosen a standard that Chasm have agreed with to sort of implement that overall structure and overall system across automation. If I had to comment on automation, my comment is safety trumps everything in regard to everything we're doing at the moment. And it's fair to say, and I don't want to get into automation, timeframes, etc. It's not really the environment, but safety will trump speed, and safety will trump timing of that rollout as well.
Okay, thank you. And just one final one. It's probably about our ongoing relationship. There's a reset happening, and I appreciate that. Wayne, you're in the helm now. And it's something, Mayor, that I've raised with you and the Chief Executive is we need to ensure our Chief Executive has a constant dialogue with Wayne. I understand that has been reset. It's something I've been asking for about a year, particularly when you're dealing with a multi-billion-dollar asset. And I've been critical of that relationship. Jim, would you like to just outline when and how this is happening now? I understand that you are now meeting with Wayne on a very regular basis. I'd also like to know how we as councillors get updated on the information that you learn from those exchanges.
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, Wayne and I had a meeting on this very subject on Monday, in fact, of this week. And we have agreed to meet on a fortnightly basis ongoing to maintain an open dialogue around key subject areas of interest, operational performance, health and safety, productivity, being the main themes of that discussion. Wayne has undertaken to provide me with a short form operational update on a regular basis. I suspect that'll be monthly, but we're yet to kind of work through the detail of that. Of course, while it's not our job to get involved in operational management matters, we do take a very active interest, and I'd certainly be willing and prepared to share that with councillors as we get that process underway.
Thank you very much. And last question is from Councillor Richard Hills.
Kia ora, thank you. Just want to say briefly, and obviously the proof is in the pudding, not just the words, but just the conversation here is probably the best conversation I've had with the Ports of Auckland in the last couple of years as a group, and I feel hopefully this means a relationship change. I have not felt comfortable in the last few meetings over the last couple of months or year. So thank you for that. And Vanessa, I know that you coming to us with what you've had today is really pleasing to hear as well. I guess my question that, and I know it's covered slightly, but so you can have all the health and safety regulations in place, but how can I be confident that with the issue that happened in June with the software situation and what could have been quite a dangerous situation, how can we ensure that the level of investment you're putting into the automation and software will ensure people are safe? Like, how can we feel confident that what you're rolling out will make sure people are safe?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is definitely what we referred to before. It is having the safety case in a system, in a more systematic process around it. It also goes to the timing we've decided on now rolling out that plan, where I said safety trumps time. And as we work through a number of phases to go to full terminal rollout, hopefully towards the end of March next year, safety is the key gateway right across that. It's about the testing, It's about a relationship with the vendor. It's about the training with our staff. It's about the system controls that are in there. So it's multi-layered, if that makes any sense, approach to safety in a automated environment.
Thank you. And just the last
I can
question.
just, sorry, add a little bit to that, is just to broaden the scope of that, not just on automation, to give you any assurance at all across health and safety across the ports of Auckland. Giving our people the voice is the answer to that. So when I came in, there was certainly a level of fear there that they couldn't talk, or they couldn't raise those risks in relation to what they were. We're certainly breaking that barrier. So for me, the voice coming from our people, that if they're not comfortable with something, they will say so.
Thank you. And just quickly, last question probably for you, Wayne. I guess in the past, and we shouldn't focus too much on the past, but we've been told, it's none of our business, things like this. Do you feel, with your current leadership or with the discussions around the board as well, that even though the legislation and everything else sets out what we actually do have a say over, but do you understand why we still feel like it's our business, and I want to know that you feel it's okay for us to be asking around the safety and well-being of Aucklanders, including ports workers?
I think the way to answer that is hopefully you've seen that change today, and our both, prepared to present where we're at, and prepared to be as open as we can be and as transparent as we can be in answering the questions. So hopefully we've demonstrated that.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And a late bid for a question, Councillor Alf Filipina.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Tēnā koe Vanessa, ngā mihi ki a koe, mō mahi. Look, my question is in relation to on our report number 8, and that relates to Chas NZ. And I've got one question for Ports of Auckland and then one procedural question to you, Your Worship, if I could ask that. So in regards to Chas NZ, Vanessa, what is your role, knowing that they're independent, what is your role in regards to their work, which according to this under 8 started on the 21st of July? And so that's one question, please.
So essentially the role is to be open and transparent. So essentially they came through from the 21st of July, open door through the business. I spent 3 hours with them in the first instance, taking them through our strategic plan, what that looks like, and then essentially set them up with a number of visits through the rest of the business so they can feel the shift and ask any questions. Open and transparent is essentially our role to make sure they get that.
All I'd add to that is we actually value that independent review. It's important for us to make sure we're getting that independent review as well.
Tēnā korua. Your Worship, my question is on number 6 with the recommendations we had through. So I know the ports are coming back in October to report. It was July and October according to the recommendations. There's also under F around the Chas NZ reporting back to us. So are we going to have 2 reporting in October? One, the Ports of Auckland is in regards to the update on the 45 or with what came out with the review, and then another reporting, which is Chas NZ coming back to us around obviously their independent review that started on the 21st. Kilda.
Yeah, the answer is yes, the Ports of Auckland is due to report to us as they are today in July. They'll report again in October, but in addition in October, having engaged Chasins to independently review what the situation was on the ports, which they did thoroughly, and then came up with a blueprint for what needed to be done. And we've had an update on the 45 recommendations today. And if you look at one of the earlier charts, it shows that actually probably that was June. By next week, we will have achieved significantly more of those recommendations. But what I wanted to have was to maintain Chasins having developed a level of expertise around what needed to happen and to recommend what should happen. I want them now independently of the port to report back to us and say, actually, this is the progress they have made, or this these are the things that they still have to do. And that just gives us some assurance. But I think most of us around here will have felt quite a level of reassurance from what we've heard today and the feedback we've also had from the Maritime Union. And everything I've heard today and the feedback I got earlier from the union was that things are heading in the right direction. Having said that, you are operating essentially in a high-risk environment on the port, and none of us can say with total assurance that there will be no more accidents. What I need to be able to know is that everything is being done and everybody is working in the same direction to prevent further accidents, and I'm increasing in my confidence that that is happening for the first time in 4 years. So, great. Hope that answers the question.
Yep, so the answer is yes.
Yep,
Thank you.
absolutely. If I can thank everybody from the ports that are here, and Sarah, I'll ask you now to withdraw from the table and see if there's any further comments. I think the questions have been what have really elicited the information that we needed. But congratulations to what you've achieved. Congratulations to you and the ports on working together with the determination to fix that situation on the wharf. That's really reassuring. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. Are there any further comments that anybody wants to make? Tracy Mulholland.
I won't talk too much, Your Worship, but just to say I acknowledge the good work that's done. I acknowledge other councillors who have made these efforts to see improvements for the safety and well-being of the community, and I support what has been said. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you should preserve that voice, Tracy. If there are no other comments, the motion has been moved and seconded. So I'll put the motion that we receive the report. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 And those are contrary, I declare that carried. And once again, thank the ports and the